Dr. Sarah Chen had seen many strange things during her 15 years as a xenobiological caretaker aboard the medical station Mercy's Hand, but nothing quite like the creature in Ward 7. The dragon, for lack of a better term, lay motionless on the massive reinforced bed, her scales a deep emerald that seemed to shimmer even in the sterile medical lighting. She was enormous, easily 20 meters from snout to tail, with wings that had been carefully folded against her sides to fit within the room's confines. The patient had been brought to the station 3 months ago by a nervous imperial courier who spoke in hushed tones about state secrets and highest priority. All Sarah knew was that the dragon had been found floating in deep space, barely alive, her life signs so weak that the automated systems had almost classified her as deceased. No identification, no records, no clue as to who she was or where she'd come from. Sarah approached the bed with her daily routine of medical supplies and monitoring equipment. The dragon's breathing was barely perceptible, a slight rise and fall of her massive chest that occurred only once every 30 seconds. Her vital signs remained stable but concerningly low, as if her body was conserving every ounce of energy for some unknown purpose. "Good morning, beautiful," Sarah whispered, as she had every day for the past 3 months. She knew the dragon couldn't hear her. The brain scans showed minimal activity, but something about the creature's peaceful expression made her feel compelled to speak anyway. "Let's see how you're doing today." As Sarah began her examination, she noticed something different. The dragon's scales, which had been dull and lifeless when she first arrived, seemed to have gained a subtle luster. Not much, barely noticeable unless you looked closely, but Sarah had been looking very closely for months. She made a note in her datapad and continued her work. The medical bay doors hissed open behind her, and Sarah turned to see Commander Phillips entering with his usual stern expression. He was the station's military liaison, responsible for security and protocol, and he made no secret of his disapproval of the resources being devoted to one patient. "Any changes, Doctor?" he asked curtly, not bothering with pleasantries. "Minor improvements in dermal condition," Sarah replied, not looking up from her scanner. "Scale luminosity has increased by approximately 2% over the past week." Phillips snorted. 2%. We're burning through medical supplies and staff time for a 2% improvement in how shiny she looks. Sarah finally turned to face him, her jaw set. "Commander, this patient is clearly a sentient being in need of medical care. The fact that we don't understand her species doesn't change our obligation to help her." "Our obligation," Phillips said, stepping closer, "is to follow orders. And our orders are to keep her alive and monitor her condition. Nothing more. The Imperial Research Division has been very clear about that." Sarah had heard variations of this conversation before, but something in Phillips's tone today set her on edge. "What aren't you telling me, Commander?" Phillips hesitated, glancing around the empty medical bay before lowering his voice. "Word from the capital is that there's been increased interest in our patient. High-level interest, the kind that comes with unmarked ships and officials who don't give their names." "What kind of officials?" "The kind that work directly for the Emperor," Phillips said quietly. "Look, Doctor, I don't know what we're dealing with here, but I'd advise you to stick to the medical protocols and avoid getting too attached." After Phillips left, Sarah stood alone with her patient, his words echoing in her mind. She looked down at the dragon's face, noting the elegant bone structure, the way her features seemed almost regal even in unconsciousness. There was something about her that spoke of nobility, of ancient wisdom and power held in check. "Who are you?" Sarah whispered, gently placing her hand on the dragon's snout. The scales were warm to the touch, warmer than they'd been yesterday. "What happened to you out there?" As if in response to her touch, the dragon's breathing seemed to deepen slightly. Sarah froze, watching for any other signs of awareness, but the moment passed. Still, she could have sworn she saw the faintest twitch of the dragon's eyelid. Over the following weeks, Sarah began to notice more subtle changes. The dragon's muscle tone was improving, her breathing becoming more regular. Most significantly, her brain activity was increasing, though it remained far below normal consciousness levels. Sarah started spending more time with her patient, talking to her about her day, about the other patients on the station, about anything that came to mind. She began bringing her lunch toward 7, eating while she worked and chatting with the dragon as if she were an old friend. Other staff members gave her odd looks, but Sarah didn't care. She had a feeling, irrational as it might be, that the dragon could hear her on some level. One evening, as Sarah was preparing to leave for the day, she noticed the dragon's tail had shifted slightly. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but Sarah had memorized every detail of the dragon's position. She quickly ran a full neurological scan, but the results showed only marginally increased activity in the motor cortex. "You're getting stronger, aren't you?" Sarah said softly, making notes in her file. "I don't know what happened to you, but you're fighting to come back." That night, Sarah dreamed of flying through space on dragon wings, of ancient cities and forgotten songs. She woke with a strange sense of loss, as if something important had slipped away with the dawn. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Sarah arrived at Ward 7 to find two figures in expensive robes examining her patient. One was clearly high-ranking Imperial medical personnel, judging by the elaborate insignia on his uniform. The other was harder to place, tall, thin, with the pale complexion of someone who spent most of their time in space. "Ah, Dr. Chen," the medical officer said without looking up from his scanner. "I'm Chief Medical Examiner Voss from the Imperial Research Division. This is Dr. Kepler, our xenobiological specialist." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Is there a problem with my patient care?" "On the contrary," Dr. Kepler spoke for the first time, his voice soft and oddly melodic. "Your work has been exemplary. The patient's improvement rate has exceeded all expectations." "Improvement rate?" Voss finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Chen, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. This patient isn't just any dragon. Based on genetic analysis and certain unique characteristics, we believe she may be of significant political importance." Sarah's mind raced. "Political importance? To whom?" "That's classified," Voss said curtly. "What I can tell you is that there will be increased security around Ward 7 from now on. Your access will continue as normal, but all visitors must be cleared through Imperial channels." After the officials left, Sarah stood alone with her patient, feeling more confused than ever. She looked down at the dragon's face, studying the elegant features. The way the afternoon light caught the gold flecks in her scales. "Important, are you?" she murmured. "Well, you've always seemed important to me." As she spoke, Sarah could have sworn she saw the dragon's lips twitch, almost as if she were trying to smile. The heart monitor showed a slight uptick in activity, but when Sarah looked more closely, everything appeared normal. That evening, as Sarah was finishing her shift, she made a decision that would change everything. Instead of leaving as usual, she decided to stay late and run some additional tests. She had a feeling that the dragon was closer to consciousness than anyone realized, and she wanted to be there when it happened. She dimmed the lights in Ward 7 and settled into the chair beside the dragon's bed, her equipment ready to monitor any changes. Hours passed in comfortable silence, with only the soft hum of medical machinery and the slow rhythm of the dragon's breathing. Around midnight, something changed. The dragon's breathing became more irregular, her heart rate increased slightly, and Sarah noticed subtle movements in her facial muscles. She was dreaming. "Easy, girl," Sarah whispered, placing her hand gently on the dragon's forehead. "You're safe here." The dragon's breathing calmed at her touch, but the brain activity continued to increase. Sarah watched the monitors with growing excitement. After months of barely detectable neural activity, the patient was showing signs of entering lighter sleep cycles. Then, without warning, the dragon's eyes opened. Sarah gasped and stumbled backward, her chair clattering to the floor. The dragon's eyes were a deep, brilliant gold, ancient and intelligent and very much awake. They focused on Sarah with an intensity that made her feel as if her soul was being examined. For several long moments, neither moved. The dragon's gaze was penetrating but not hostile, curious rather than threatening. Slowly, carefully, Sarah stepped closer to the bed. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is Sarah. You're safe." The dragon's eyes followed her movement, clearly tracking her position. Her mouth opened slightly, and Sarah heard a sound like wind through distant mountains, a voice, weak but unmistakably intelligent. "Sarah," the dragon whispered, the name rolling off her tongue like music. "Safe." Sarah's hands shook as she reached for her communicator. This was it. First contact with a conscious dragon patient. But as her finger hovered over the call button, the dragon spoke again. "No," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Not yet." "Please see." Sarah hesitated. Protocol demanded that she immediately notify the medical team and security of any change in the patient's condition. But something in the dragon's golden eyes, a vulnerability mixed with ancient wisdom, made her pause. "You can understand me," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. The dragon's head moved slightly, a nod so subtle it was barely perceptible. "Yes, have been listening. Your voices kept me anchored." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. All those months of talking to an apparently unconscious patient, and she had been listening all along. "Who are you?" Sarah asked. "Everyone's been looking for information about you." The dragon's eyes darkened, and for a moment she looked infinitely sad. "That is complicated. There are things, dangerous things that I remember, and things I have forgotten. The Imperial officials think you're politically important." A sound escaped the dragon that might have been laughter if it weren't so bitter. "Politics, always politics. Tell me, small healer, what do you know of the Imperial family?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "Not much, I suppose. There's the Emperor, of course. He's ruled for over 30 years. Before that, his father. I know he had a wife who died years ago, and I think there were children, but—" Sarah stopped speaking as she saw the expression in the dragon's eyes. There was recognition there, and pain so deep it seemed to echo through the room. "Children's," the dragon repeated softly. "Yes, there was a son. My son." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at the dragon, her mind trying to process the implications. If this was true, if the dragon was somehow related to the Imperial family— "You're the Emperor's mother," Sarah whispered. The dragon's eyes closed, and for a moment Sarah thought she had lost consciousness again. But when they reopened, they were filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "I was long ago, before the changes, before the exile, before I became this." She gestured weakly with one massive claw toward her draconic form. "I was Empress Lyrelai, mother of Prince Demon, now Emperor of the known worlds." Sarah's legs gave out, and she collapsed back into her chair. The implications were staggering. The dragon she had been caring for, talking to, comforting for months, was the Emperor's mother, a woman who had supposedly died decades ago. "How?" was all Sarah could manage. "Magic," the dragon said simply. "Ancient magic. A curse meant to protect, but that became a prison. I chose this as form to escape assassination. But the cess spell went wrong. I have been trapped, neither fully dragon nor human, for 35 years. But why were you floating in space? How did you end up here? The dragon's expression grew troubled. I was fleeing. There are those who would usse me against my sin, who would usse the truth of what I became to destroy the empire. I thought it would be safer if I disappeared entirely. Sarah felt a surge of protective anger. You've been alone all this time? For 35 years? Until you, the dragon said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice now. Your voice, your care. You gave me Riasan to fight back to consciousness. You gave me hope. Sarah reached out without thinking, placing her hand on the dragon's massive paw. You don't have to be alone anymore. The dragon's eyes filled with what could only be tears. But I cannot go back. If my son learns this what I have become, if the courtiers learn that their empress is a monster. You're not a monster, Sarah said firmly. You're a mother who sacrificed everything to protect her son, and maybe it's time he knew you're still alive. The dragon stared at her for a long moment. You would risk everything for a broken old dragon? You're not broken, Sarah replied. You're healing, and yes, I would risk everything. Because everyone deserves to be reunited with their family. As they spoke, neither noticed the small observation drone that had been quietly recording everything from its position near the ceiling. Nor did they see the figure in the security office, who was watching the feed with growing amazement, his hands shaking as he reached for a priority communication channel. In his private chambers halfway across the galaxy, Emperor Demon was about to receive news that would change everything he thought he knew about his past, his family, and the mother he had mourned for 35 years. Emperor Demon Valdris stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the stars streak past as they traveled through hyperspace. At 57 years old, he had ruled the vast Terran Empire for over 3 decades, ever since his father's death when he was barely 24. It had been a reign marked by expansion, prosperity, and an iron determination to never show weakness to his enemies. But tonight, something felt different. The emergency communication he had received 6 hours ago had shaken him in ways he didn't want to examine too closely. Admiral Reyes, his most trusted advisor, approached from behind with careful steps. Your Majesty, Reyes said quietly. We'll be dropping out of hyperspace in 30 minutes. The medical station is already preparing for our arrival. Demon didn't turn around. Tell me again what the surveillance footage showed, Admiral. I want to hear every detail. Reyes cleared his throat nervously. He had served the Emperor for 15 years and had never seen him quite like this. Controlled on the surface, but with an underlying tension that seemed ready to snap. The patient in Ward 7 regained consciousness at approximately midnight station time. She engaged in conversation with Dr. Chen for nearly 2 hours. During this conversation, she claimed to be... Reyes paused, still not quite believing what he was about to say. She claimed to be former Empress Lyra Ley, Your Majesty's mother. Demon's hands tightened on the railing. His mother had died when he was 22, just 2 years before he took the throne. At least that's what he had been told. Her body had been found in the wreckage of her private transport after what was officially reported as an engine malfunction. The funeral had been elaborate, befitting an empress, but closed casket due to the extent of the damage. And the genetic analysis? Dr. Voss ran a complete DNA comparison using samples from the Imperial Medical Archives. The results... Reyes hesitated again. Your Majesty, the results show a 99.7% probability of a direct familial relationship. Demon closed his eyes. For 35 years, he had mourned his mother. For 35 years, He had ruled with the weight of her loss, driving him to prove himself worthy of the throne she had helped prepare him for. And now he was being told that she might still be alive, transformed into something unimaginable and floating in the void of space like a piece of cosmic debris. What condition is she in now? Stable and alert, according to the latest reports. Dr. Chen has continued to care for her, and apparently, the patient specifically requested that no one else be informed of her awakening until Your Majesty could be contacted directly. Demon finally turned around, his face a mask of imperial composure that betrayed none of the turmoil beneath. Interesting. And Dr. Chen? What do we know about her? 15-year veteran of the medical service, exemplary record, no political affiliations. She appears to have developed a genuine attachment to the patient during the months of care. Months, Demon repeated. She's been alive for months, and we're only discovering this now. The patient was in a deep coma, Your Majesty. There was no way to know she was conscious or aware. Demon began pacing the length of the observation deck, his long coat flowing behind him. If this is truly my mother, then someone has been lying to me for 35 years. Someone arranged a fake funeral, fake medical reports, fake everything. I need to know who and why. Already being investigated, Your Majesty. But perhaps we should focus on the immediate situation first. The Emperor stopped pacing and looked directly at his admiral. The immediate situation is that I may be about to face the most important conversation of my life. A conversation with a mother I thought was dead, who apparently chose to disappear rather than remain in her family. Reyes had no response to that. The personal pain in the Emperor's voice was unmistakable, despite his attempts to maintain imperial dignity. When the Eternal Dominion dropped out of hyperspace near the medical station, word spread quickly through the facility that the Emperor himself was coming aboard. Commander Phillips scrambled to ensure proper security protocols, while the medical staff prepared for the highest-level inspection they'd ever undergone. Sarah Chen received the news while she was sitting beside the dragon's bed, reading aloud from a collection of old Earth poetry. The dragon, Lyrelai, as Sarah now thought of her, had remained conscious and alert since their first conversation, though she tired easily and slept frequently. "Your son is coming," Sarah said gently, setting down the book. Lyrelai's golden eyes showed a mixture of anticipation and terror. "I have dreamed of this moment for so long, but now I am afraid. What if he cannot accept what I have become? What if he sees only the monster?" "He'll see his mother," Sarah replied firmly. "The woman who loved him enough to sacrifice everything to keep him safe." "You have such faith in goodness, little healer. But emperors learn to be hard. They have to be." Sarah reached out and stroked the scales on Lyrelai's massive head. Over the past few days, she had grown accustomed to the dragon's physical form, seeing past the scales and claws to the intelligent, caring woman beneath. "Tell me about him," Sarah said. "What was he like as a child?" Lyrelai's eyes grew soft with memory. "Curious, always asking questions about everything. He had his father's strength but my love of learning. He would follow me through the gardens, making up stories about the flowers and trees." Her voice became sad. "I wonder if he remembers those days." "I'm sure he does. I hope he does not resent me for leaving. The curse was meant to be temporary, you understand. I was to disappear for a few months, let the assassins believe I was dead, then return when it was safe. But the magic, it trapped me. I could not change back." Sarah had heard pieces of this story over the past few days, but it still amazed her. According to Lyrelai, there had been a conspiracy among certain noble houses to kill the entire royal family and seize control of the empire. Desperate to protect her husband and son, she had sought help from an ancient sorceress who promised a way to fake her death convincingly. The plan had been for Lyra to transform into a dragon temporarily, stage her own death in a transport explosion, and then hide until the conspirators could be identified and eliminated. But something had gone wrong with the transformation spell. Instead of lasting days or weeks, it had become permanent. And worse, it had affected her memory, leaving her confused and disoriented for years. By the time she had regained enough of herself to remember who she truly was, her husband was dead, and her son was emperor. She had watched from afar, unable to return because she no longer looked human, terrified that her monstrous appearance would undermine his rule or be used against him by his enemies. "Your Majesty," Commander Phillips's voice came through the comm system. "The Emperor's shuttle is requesting clearance to dock." Lyra's breathing became rapid and shallow. "I cannot do this. Sarah, please tell him I was delirious, that I was not thinking clearly." "Look at me," Sarah said firmly, taking the dragon's massive head in both hands. "You are Empress Lyra. You are his mother, and you have survived 35 years of exile, loneliness, and transformation. You can do this." The dragon stared into Sarah's eyes, drawing strength from her certainty. Slowly, she nodded. 15 minutes later, the medical bay doors opened to admit the most powerful man in known space. Emperor Demon entered flanked by 2 guards, though he quickly gestured for them to wait outside. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched by silver at the temples and intelligent brown eyes that Sarah immediately recognized as similar to the dragon's golden ones. He stopped just inside the doorway, staring at the enormous creature on the medical bed. For a long moment, no one spoke. Sarah could feel the tension in the room like a physical force. Finally, the Emperor stepped closer. "Mother?" The single word carried a universe of pain, hope, and desperate longing. Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son. No longer the young prince she remembered, but a mature man bearing the weight of an empire. "Demon," she whispered, her voice breaking on his name. "My dear boy, how you have grown." The Emperor's composure cracked visibly. Sarah watched as 35 years of grief and loss played across his features. He took another step forward, then another, until he was standing directly beside the bed. "They told me you were dead," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I mourned you. I built monuments to you. I've carried your death as guilt for 35 years, wondering if I could have prevented it somehow." "Oh, my darling," Lyra breathed. "I am so sorry. I never meant for you to suffer." "The plan was only supposed to last a few weeks." "What plan? What happened to you?" Slowly, carefully, Lyra told her son everything. About the conspiracy against the royal family, about the assassination attempts that had grown bolder each month, about her desperate decision to seek magical help. She explained how the transformation spell had gone wrong, trapping her in dragon form and clouding her memory for years. "There were letters," she said, "hidden in my private study. Details about the conspiracourse. Did you ever find them?" Demon shook his head. "Your chambers were sealed after the funeral. I couldn't bear to go through them." "Then they are still there. The evidences of who wanted us dead." As his mother spoke, Demon found himself studying her alien features, looking for traces of the woman he remembered. It was there in her eyes, in the cadence of her speech, despite the dragon's lisp, in the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. This was truly his mother, transformed beyond recognition, but still fundamentally herself. "Why didn't you try to contact me?" he asked. "Once you remembered who you were, why didn't you find a way to let me know you were alive?" Lyra's gaze dropped. "Look at me, Demon. I am a monster. How could an emperor acknowledge such a creature as his mother? Your enemies would us it against you. They would say you were tainted by magic, by monstrosity." "My enemies can go to hell," Demon said fiercely, surprising both Sarah and his mother with the vehemence in his voice. "You are my mother. Nothing else matters." For the first time since her transformation, Lyrelai allowed herself to hope. She reached out slowly with one massive claw, stopping just short of touching her son's hand. "I have missed you," she whispered. "Every day, every year. I have watched from afar, seen you become the ruler I always knew you would be. I am so proud." Demon looked at the claw hovering near his hand, then without hesitation reached out and grasped it gently. The scales were warm and smooth, and he could feel the tremor of emotion in his mother's massive frame. "Come home," he said simply. "Come home with me." Lyrelai shook her great head sadly. "I cannot. How can I return to court like this? How can I take my place as Empress Mother when I look like a creaturess from a nightmare?" "Because you're family," Demon replied. "Because I need you. And because Dr. Chen here has shown me that it's possible to see past appearances to the person beneath." Sarah blinked in surprise as both pairs of eyes turned toward her. She had been so absorbed in watching the reunion that she had almost forgotten her own presence in the room. "Dr. Chen has been taking care of you," Demon continued, looking at Sarah with genuine gratitude. "She's the reason you recovered consciousness, isn't she?" "Yes," Lyrelai confirmed. "Her voice, her care, her refusal to see me as anything less than a person worthy of compassion. She gave me resistance to fight back to awareness." Demon studied Sarah for a moment, then surprised her by offering a formal bow. "Dr. Chen, you have given me back my mother. There is no reward I could offer that would be sufficient." "I don't want a reward," Sarah said quietly. "I just want to know that she'll be safe and cared for." "She will be," Demon promised. "I'll make sure of it." He turned back to his mother. "There must be a way to reverse the transformation. Magic that can change you into this form should be able to change you back. The sorceresses who cast the original spell is long dead. And even if she were not, Demon, I am not the same woman I was 35 years ago. The dragon is part of me now. I do not know if I want to change back." "Then don't," her son said immediately. "If this is who you are now, then this is who you are. The Empire will adjust. My people will learn to accept you, or they will answer to me." Sarah watched the interchange with growing amazement. The Emperor was willing to potentially destabilize his entire rule for the sake of his mother. It spoke to a depth of love and loyalty that she hadn't expected from someone in his position. "There will be challenges," Lyrelai warned. "Political complications. Your nobles' men will not understand." "Let me worry about the nobles," Demon said firmly. "You've spent 35 years in exile, sacrificing your happiness for the sake of the Empire. It's time the Empire sacrificed something for you." As Sarah watched mother and son reconnect across the gulf of decades and transformation, she felt a deep satisfaction. This was why she had become a healer, not just to mend bodies, but to mend hearts and families as well. But their reunion was interrupted by an urgent chiming from the communication system. Admiral Reyes's voice filled the room. "Your Majesty, we're receiving priority signals from the capital. There's been some kind of incident at the Imperial Palace. Lord Chancellor Morrison is demanding your immediate return." Demon's expression darkened. "What kind of incident?" "Unknown, Your Majesty. The transmission was heavily encrypted and incomplete. But the Chancellor seemed agitated." Sarah saw Lyrelai's eyes narrow with suspicion. "Morrison," she hissed. "That name, it was in the letters. One of the conspirators." Demon went very still. "Morrison has been Chancellor for 20 years. He's been one of my most trusted advisors." "He was one of those who wanted your father and you dead," Lyrale said with certainty. The fact that he has survived and prospered while I was in exile, that cannot be coincidence. The Emperor's face had gone hard as stone. Admiral Reyes, how long until we can reach the capital? 18 hours at maximum speed, Your Majesty. Make it so. Demon turned back to his mother. Mother, I need you to come with me. If Morrison is truly part of the conspiracy that supposedly killed you, then your presence will force his hand. We'll finally have the truth. It will be dangerous, Lyrale warned. If he has maintained his position for decades, he must have other allies. All the more reason to face this now before he can prepare further, Demon replied. Besides, I have something he doesn't expect, a dragon on my side. For the first time since her awakening, Sarah saw Lyrale smile, a fearsome expression on a dragon's face, but unmistakably pleased. Dr. Chen, the Emperor said, turning to Sarah once more, I'd like you to come with us as well. My mother trusts you, and I suspect we're going to need someone with medical expertise before this is over. Sarah felt her heart racing. Your Majesty, I'm just a station doctor. I don't know anything about palace politics or conspiracies. You know about caring for people, Demon replied. Sometimes that's the most important knowledge of all. As the medical team prepared to transport Lyrale to the Emperor's flagship, Sarah felt as if she was stepping into a story much larger than anything she had ever imagined. But looking at the dragon who had become her patient, her friend, and now apparently the key to unraveling a 35-year-old conspiracy, she knew she couldn't abandon her now. The real test was about to begin. The Imperial Palace on Valdris Prime was in chaos when the Eternal Dominion arrived. Sarah stood beside Lyrale in the ship's main cargo bay, which had been hastily converted into a temporary medical facility for the dragon's comfort. Through the massive viewports, she could see the capital city stretching to the horizon, its gleaming spires and floating platforms a testament to the Empire's technological might. Emperor Demon paced the bay with barely contained energy. His military advisors clustered around him as they received reports from the surface. What they were hearing was not encouraging. Lord Chancellor Morrison has declared a state of emergency, Admiral Reyes reported grimly. He claims there's been an attempt on your life and that your extended absence proves the plot was successful. 3 noble houses have already pledged their support to his emergency government. A coup, Demon said flatly. He's using my absence to seize power. It gets us worse, say, my dear, Lyrale interjected from her resting position. She had been listening to the reports with growing alarm. If Morrison has been planning this for decades, he will have prepared for your return. You cannot simply walk back into the palace and resume your throne. Sarah watched the interchange with fascination. It was clear that despite the 35 years apart, mother and son still thought alike when it came to political strategy. Lyrale's voice might hiss with draconic inflection, but her mind was still that of an experienced empress. The guard units stationed at the palace are reporting conflicting loyalties, another advisor added. Some remain loyal to your Majesty, others have apparently been swayed by Morrison's claims. We can't be sure who to trust. Demon stopped pacing and looked directly at his mother. What do you think we should do? We us the one advantage he cannot have planned for, Lyrale replied. My presence. If I appear before the noble assemblies, if they see that the former empresses live as it will throw his entire narrative into question. But mother, you're... Demon hesitated. A dragon, Lyrale finished calmly. Yes, but I am also the woman who once ruled beside your father. Some of the noblesse will remember that. And those who were part of the original conspiracy will be terrified. Sarah cleared her throat tentatively. Forgive me, but won't your appearance as a dragon just give Morrison more ammunition? Won't he claim you're some kind of imposter, or that the royal family has been corrupted by magic? Lyrelei turned her golden eyes toward Sarah with what might have been approval. The healer asks good questions. Yes, Morrison will try to my transformation against us, but I have evidence he cannot dispute. What evidence? Demon asked. The letters I mentioned are still in my chambers, but there is something more. During my years in exile, I did not simply hide. I gathered information. I watched. I learned who the real conspirators were and how they have maintained their power. Lyrelei's voice became hard as steel. I know where the bodies are buried. Metaphorically speaking, Admiral Reyes stepped forward. Your Majesty, the Palace Guard is requesting immediate communication. Apparently, Lord Chancellor Morrison wishes to speak with you directly. Demon looked at his mother, who nodded slightly. Put him through, but visual only. Don't let him see the cargo bay. The main display screen flickered to life, showing a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp aristocratic features. Lord Chancellor Morrison looked concerned and appropriately grieved as he began to speak. Your Majesty, thank the stars you're alive. We received reports that your ship had been attacked. And when you failed to return from your medical inspection, Morrison's voice was perfectly pitched with relief and worry. As you can see, Chancellor, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated, Demon replied coolly. I understand you've taken some drastic actions in my absence. Only what was necessary to maintain stability, Your Majesty. When word spread that you might have been killed, 3 of the outer systems began mobilizing their fleets. I had to act quickly to prevent civil war. Sarah watched Morrison's performance with growing suspicion. The man was good, his concerns seemed genuine, his explanations reasonable. But there was something in his eyes, a calculating quality that made her skin crawl. I appreciate your initiative, Chancellor, Demon said. I'll be returning to the palace immediately to resume my duties. Of course, Your Majesty. Though I should warn you, there are still some security concerns. Perhaps it would be wise to coordinate your return through proper channels, ensure adequate protection. I think I can manage my own security, thank you. Morrison's mask slipped for just an instant, a flash of irritation crossing his features before the concerned expression returned. As you wish, Your Majesty. The palace awaits your return. The transmission ended, and the cargo bay fell silent. Finally, Admiral Reyes spoke. He's stalling for time, trying to delay your return while he consolidates power. Obviously, Demon agreed. The question is, how do we approach this? A direct assault on the palace would work militarily, but it would also legitimize his claims about a coup attempt. We go in openly, Lyrelei suggested. We announce my return to the entire empire simultaneously. Morrison cannot claim ignorancy or deny the truth if the whole galaxy is watching. Sarah felt compelled to speak up again. But won't that also announce to everyone that the royal family has been changed? That could destabilize everything. Demon looked at her thoughtfully. You're right. This needs to be handled carefully. He turned to his communications officer. Can we arrange for a live broadcast to the entire Imperial network? Yes, Your Majesty. We can override all channels if necessary. Do it. Schedule an empire-wide address in 2 hours. Tell them the Emperor has important news about the royal family. As the ship's crew prepared for the broadcast, Sarah found herself alone with Lyrelei while Demon coordinated with his advisors. The dragon seemed calm, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs of her anxiety. Are you ready for this? Sarah asked gently. Lyrelei was quiet for a long moment. I have been hiding for 35 years. I am tired of hiding, but I confess I am terrified of what the people will think when they see me. They'll think you're incredibly brave, Sarah said firmly. a mother who sacrificed everything for her family and her empire. They'll see strength, not weakness. I hope you are right, little healer. But if this goes badly, if the people reject what I have become, it could destroy the empire my family has built. Sarah reached out and stroked the scales on Lorelai's neck. Then we make sure it doesn't go badly. We tell your story the right way. An hour later, Sarah found herself standing behind the main camera as Emperor Demon prepared for his address. Lorelai was positioned just out of frame, ready to enter when the moment was right. The dragon's massive form was draped with a ceremonial cloak bearing the royal coat of arms, a touch that had been Sarah's suggestion. "Citizens of the Terran Empire," Demon began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "For 35 years, our empire has mourned the loss of Empress Lorelai, my beloved mother, who died protecting our family from those who would see us destroyed." As he spoke, Sarah watched the real-time response feeds from across the empire. Billions of people were watching, hanging on every word. Today, I have discovered that the reports of her death were false. My mother has been alive all these years, though changed by the very magic she used to protect our family. She chose exile rather than risk destabilizing the empire with her transformation. Murmurs of shock and confusion rippled through the monitoring stations. Some of you may find what I'm about to show you disturbing or frightening, but I ask you to look beyond appearance to the heart of the woman who gave up everything for the sake of duty and love. Demon gestured, and Lorelai moved slowly into frame. The sight of the enormous dragon wearing the imperial regalia was striking, majestic in a way that even Sarah hadn't expected. "Citizens of the Empire," Lorelai spoke, her voice carrying clearly despite the draconic inflection. "I am Empress's Lorelai. I live. I have returned." The response from across the empire was immediate and varied. Some worlds erupted in celebration at the return of their beloved empress. Others seemed stunned into silence, but the overall reaction was more positive than Sarah had dared hope. Then Morrison's voice cut across all channels. "This is an outrage!" The Chancellor's transmission overrode the Imperial broadcast. "Citizens, you are being deceived. This creature is not the Empress. It is some alien monstrosity wearing her identity. The real Emperor would never associate with such a being." Sarah felt Lorelai tense beside her, but the dragon's voice remained steady as she responded. "Lord Chancellor Morrison, how interesting that you would speak of desuccession, given your own role in my supposed death." Morrison's face went pale on the screen. "I don't know what you mean. I served your family faithfully." "Did you?" Lorelai interrupted, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. "Tell me, Chancellor, do you remember the meetings in the Rossi Garden? The discussions about removing obstacles to power? The plans to eliminate the entire royal line?" That's completely false." "I have letters," Lorelai continued implacably. "Signed letters from you to Lord Blackwood and Countess Varga discussing the timing of the assassination attempts. They are in my old chambers, where they have waited 35 years for this moment." Sarah watched Morrison's face on the screen as the man realized his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. His mask of concerned loyalty finally slipped completely, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "Even if that were true," Morrison said desperately, "look at what you've become. You're a monster. The Empire cannot be ruled by monsters." "You are right," Lorelai replied calmly. "The Empire cannot be ruled by monsters. That is why my son will continue as Emperor, and you will face justice for your crimes." What happened next occurred so quickly that Sarah barely had time to process it. Morrison's transmission cut out, and immediately alarms began sounding across the ship's bridge. "Your Majesty," Admiral Reyes called out, We're detecting weapons signatures from the palace. Morrison's activated the planetary defense system. He's going to fire on his own capital? Demon asked incredulously. Negative. The weapons are aimed at us. He's targeting the ship. Sarah felt her heart stop as she realized what was happening. Morrison, cornered and desperate, was willing to commit mass murder to eliminate the threat to his power. How long until we're in range? Demon demanded. 3 minutes, Your Majesty. Lirelei suddenly rose to her full height, her eyes blazing with an inner fire that Sarah had never seen before. Take me to the cargo bay, she commanded. Open the outer door, sis. Mother, what are you thinking? I am thinking that it's time to remind the galaxy why dragons, sis, are feared, Lirelei replied grimly. Morrison forgets us that I am no longer bound by human limitations, sis. Sarah watched in amazement as the dragon moved with surprising grace toward the cargo bay. Despite her months of caring for Lirelei, she had never really considered what the woman might be capable of in her transformed state. Your Majesty, Admiral Reyes called out urgently, the planetary defenses are powering up. We need to retreat or return fire. Neither, Demon replied, following his mother to the cargo bay. We're going to trust in the woman who saved our empire once before. The massive cargo doors began to cycle open, revealing the space between the ship and the gleaming planet below. Sarah felt the artificial gravity field hold her in place as the atmosphere rushed out into vacuum. Lirelei positioned herself at the edge of the opening, her great wings spreading wide. For the first time since Sarah had known her, the dragon looked truly magnificent. Not a patient to be cared for, but a force of nature preparing to act. Sarah, Lirelei called out over the rush of escaping air, I want you to know, caring for me, believing in me, giving me hope, you have saved more than just one old dragon. You have saved an empire. Before Sarah could respond, Lirelei launched herself out into space. What followed was unlike anything in recorded Imperial history. The dragon flew through vacuum as if it were atmosphere, her scales glowing with an inner light that became visible even from their orbital distance. She descended toward the planet like a falling star, but one that moved with purpose and intelligence. The planetary defense systems fired, sending massive energy beams toward the ship. But Lirelei intercepted them, her draconic form somehow absorbing and redirecting the destructive energy. Sarah watched in awe as the dragon literally breathed the absorbed energy back at the planet's surface, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a spectacular light show that could be seen from orbit. She's overloading the defense grid, Admiral Reyes reported, his voice filled with wonder. The energy feedback is causing a cascade failure across the entire system. But more than that, Lirelei was making a statement. Every person on the planet below could see the dragon in the sky, could witness her power, and understand that she was choosing not to destroy, but to protect. She was demonstrating that despite her fearsome appearance, she remained the loving mother and protective empress she had always been. When the dragon finally returned to the ship, settling gently in the cargo bay with her scales still glowing softly, Sarah rushed to her side. That was incredible, Sarah breathed. Are you hurt? No, little healer, Lirelei replied, though she sounded tired. But I think Chancellor Morrison understands now that he has chosen the wrong family to betray. Indeed, Morrison's resistance collapsed almost immediately after the display. Faced with visual proof of the Empress's power and the evidence of his own treachery, he surrendered to Imperial forces within hours. The noble houses that had supported him quickly switched sides, and the conspiracy that had lasted 35 years finally came to an end. 1 month later, Sarah stood in the Imperial Gardens watching Emperor Demon and Empress Mother Lirelei hold court together. The dragon reclined on a specially constructed dais, while her son handled the formal business of government, It was an unusual sight, but one that the Empire had adapted to with surprising speed. The truth about the conspiracy had shaken many people's faith in the government, but the sight of the royal family reunited, stronger than ever despite the challenges they had faced, had provided a new source of hope and stability. "Dr. Chen," a voice behind her said, and Sarah turned to find Admiral Reyes approaching. "His Majesty has asked me to extend an offer to you." "What kind of offer?" "A permanent position as royal family physician, specifically as the Empress Mother's primary care provider." Sarah looked across the garden to where Lyrelei was gently nuzzling a small child who had approached without fear, drawn by the dragon's gentle demeanor despite her fearsome appearance. "I think I'd like that," Sarah said with a smile. "I think I'd like that very much." As she watched, Lyrelei caught her eye and nodded slightly, a gesture of gratitude and friendship that needed no words. The dragon who had been a forgotten patient had become an empress again. But more than that, she had become living proof that families could overcome any obstacle, that love could transcend any transformation, and that sometimes the most important healing happened not in the body, but in the heart. The Empire had its empress back, but Sarah knew that the real victory was simpler and more profound. A mother and son had found each other again, and that was worth more than all the political power in the galaxy. In the months that followed, as Sarah watched Lyrelei adapt to her new role as both dragon and empress, she often reflected on how the universe had a way of bringing people together when they needed each other most. She had thought she was simply caring for an injured patient, but in reality, she had been helping to heal a family, an empire, and ultimately, herself. The Dragon Empress became a symbol of resilience and transformation across the galaxy. Children grew up hearing stories of the mother who loved her family so much that she became a monster to protect them, and who chose to remain that way rather than abandon the strength it had given her. And in the quiet moments between royal duties, when Sarah would sit in the gardens reading poetry to her friend, both women knew that they had found something more valuable than political power or medical achievement. They had found the unshakable bond that comes from seeing someone at their most vulnerable and choosing to stand by them regardless of the cost. The empire prospered under the joint rule of Emperor and Empress Mother, but the real legacy was simpler: proof that love, compassion, and courage could overcome any transformation, any conspiracy, and any obstacle that the universe might place in their path.